Welcome everybody and good evening to all of you. In a universal way, we welcome people to the teaching, so we don't have to do it in a very special or particular way. We can just do it in a way that we normally greet each other from the perspective of the world. So welcome everybody, good evening. The first thing that we will do is to correct the motivation. But rather than going into an extensive explanation with respect to the way that we correct the motivation, take your time to do it. You've already learned the way to correct your motivation. You already know how to do it, so do it on your own time. We will begin the session with a recitation of Gaden Shartse, the 100 of deities of the land of joy. So please correct your motivation at the beginning of this recitation. We're gonna before the recitation of Gaden Shartse, we will recite the verse for refuge and bodhicitta. So we need to generate the basis for our Dhamma practice in terms of our going for refuge. Right? Refuge is the basis for whatever we do in our Dhamma engagement, whether we engage in certain Dhamma practices, whether we engage in the taking of certain vows, whether we engage in the practice of mantra. Refuge constitutes the very basis, the very foundation of all of these Dhamma activities. Without refuge, whatever we do in terms of our practice of mantra and the like, whatever we do will not be of benefit without refuge. So we will go for refuge, and on top of that we also need to develop bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment. So we will then, first of going for refuge, you already have had teachings and explanation of the way that we go for refuge. So we will suffice with that for the time being, keeping in mind that later on in the text we will study an extensive presentation of the topic of refuge. So it's still coming. We will still have an extensive explanation of refuge. So think about your going for refuge and bodhicitta, and through that develop your motivation. Currently we're looking at a section that explains the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher, and the section consists of two main points. Now, looking at the first main point in the text that explains the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher, which is the root of the path, we have a few points that come out of this main point. The first one is the benefits of relying upon a spiritual teacher. So then you might wonder, if I correctly rely upon a spiritual teacher, what benefit do I get from that? So drawing from the instructions of excellent lamas, 8 benefits are presented in this section. So there are 8, you could say that there are 8 points in the section that explains the benefit of relying upon a spiritual teacher, and of those 8 benefits, we have covered 3 of them. So today we're going to pick up from the 4th benefit. For those of you who are using the outline for this Lamrim text, please look at the outline so that you will be able also to keep track of where we are in the text. So then, looking at the 4th benefit explained in the text, the 4th benefit says you will automatically put a stop to all delusions, all afflictive states of mind, and misdeeds, negative actions, faulty behavior that we normally engage with. So through relying upon a spiritual teacher and doing it correctly, we will automatically put a stop to all such afflictive states of mind and misdeeds. So Pabongka Rinpoche explains that in the following way. When you rely on a spiritual teacher, you will know how to modify your behavior. To modify our behavior would be in terms of knowing what are the things that we need to take up and what are the things that we need to set aside, to cast aside. Not only we will know correctly what we need to do in terms of what we need to avoid and what we need to practice, also through relying upon a spiritual teacher, we will correctly put it into practice. So therefore, here Pabongka Rinpoche says, you will know how to modify your behavior, and you will actually act in this way, the same way that you now automatically stop your misdeeds while you're living close to your spiritual guide or in your teacher's house. So when you think about it, when you're in close proximity to your teacher, when you're in close proximity to the Lama, when, for example, you're spending some time with that person, or when you're spending some time in their house, you automatically shun negative actions. You automatically modify your behavior, in that you know that if you're going to engage in a certain form of misdeed at the presence of your Lama, you're going to either get a scolding, you have a sense of fear in your mind, you feel a bit apprehensive. So automatically you can shun misdeeds while you're living in close proximity to your spiritual teacher. And also you know that your spiritual teacher is going to advise you, is going to give you a good advice with respect to what you ought to do and what you should not do when you're in the presence. So you will also know how to then properly put it into practice, how to abstain from such negative actions. So our text continues in saying, the laying out of Stoic Sutra tells us the things done by people driven by karma and delusions are difficult for bodhisattvas who are under the care of virtuous spiritual guides, which means that remaining in close proximity to our spiritual teachers, relying upon the spiritual teachers, those bodhisattvas are not being harmed, are not being injured by karma and delusions, karma and afflictive states of mind, which means that thinking of the way that our mind normally works, thinking of the different activities that we do throughout the day, in so far as eating a food, having drinks, having some drinks, going to different places, staying in a particular place. Actually, when we look at the things that we do right off when we wake up in the morning, when we think of the different parts of the day, right off when we wake up in the morning, we can see how a mind is by and large under the influence of attachment, the sense of desire. So we wake up in the morning and we think that, what will I have for breakfast? I want to have coffee, I want to have tea, and so forth. So when you think of those ideas, those thoughts that occur to us right when we wake up in the morning, you can see how we do all those different things because we are under the control of attachment. Because of attachment, we think of, I want to have coffee. Because of attachment, you think that I should have tea and the like. And likewise, when you think of the other things that we do in our life or throughout the day, you can see how, by and large, we do different things under the control of attachment, to the point in which it is so hard to find even a single action that we take which is not connected with, which is not related to attachment. So then, when we think of the benefit of relying upon a spiritual teacher, we can think about it in terms of not being affected, not being injured, not being susceptible to such afflictive states of mind, such as anger, attachment, and other physical and verbal expressions that we take, which are motivated by those afflictive states of mind. So this is the benefit of relying upon a spiritual teacher. And this section concludes in saying that the essence of the nectar Lamrim says, as you respectfully rely on him, upon a spiritual teacher, you will automatically stop all delusions and misdeeds. Now, when it refers to stopping all afflictive states of mind and misdeeds, it's not just a blank statement that Pabongka Rinpoche just made up. It is actually found in the sutras and the commentaries, the great treatises that were composed on the basis of these sutras. Such benefits of relying upon a spiritual teacher, as far as naturally putting a stop or automatically putting a stop to all of our afflictive states of mind and misdeeds, is found across the board in the sutras and the treatises. So then when we think of how we will not be affected by such afflictive states of mind and misdeeds, and in what situation we will obtain control over the mind, well, it will come through receiving teachings from our spiritual teacher that will correctly teach us what are the things that we need to take up and what are the things that we need to cast aside, to stop doing. So the teacher is the one that correctly teaches us those things, in a way, teaches us in a way that is unerring. But then looking at our current situation, often we pay no heed to teachings that we get from our teachers with respect to what we ought to do and what we ought not to do. Or it might be the case that we don't trust the Lama, that we don't believe what the spiritual teacher is telling us. So then, thinking of a sense of freedom or independence, do we have a sense of independence? We have no independence because we are under the control of the mind, right? So we have no control because what controls us is the mind. So our mind tells us what to do, and subsequently we do what the mind tells us. So it tells us to rise up, and we stand up. It tells us to have a drink, and we have a drink, right? So we are under the control of our mind. It's not that we have control over the things that we do. We are under the control of our mind. And if you wonder, what is the mind controlled by? What is the thing that controls the mind? Well, the mind is controlled by afflictive states of mind, which lead us around to different situations. In a sense that we are propelled by the mind to do all sorts of different things. The mind leads us around through anger, attachment, and other afflictive states of mind that cause us to engage in a variety of activities. So this benefit that we're looking at the moment says that by relying correctly upon a spiritual teacher, such states will automatically abate, in that we will no longer be under the control of such afflictive states of mind. We will no longer engage in such misdeeds. Yeah, so think about it. We have no sense of control. We are controlled by the mind. And the mind is controlled by afflictive states of mind, anger, attachment, and so forth. So through relying upon a spiritual teacher, the states will naturally come to stop, will cease. So it's important to think about it. It is important to recognize this benefit of relying upon a spiritual teacher. Let's look at the next benefit, which is reading in our text, your insights and realizations into the levels on the path will increase. First off, let's look at this heading. The word that is used in Tibetan for insights and realizations consists of two elements. Insights refer to your practice, actually, the type of experience that you develop through your practice. So your experience or your practice and the realizations that are derived from your practice into the levels, which means into the grounds and paths that you develop in your practice, in that you progress from one path to the next one, to a higher one, from one ground to the next one, to a higher one. So through correctly relying upon a spiritual teacher, your practice will develop, your realizations will increase, so that you'll be able to ascend to higher and higher grounds in your practice. So you're relying upon your kind root teacher, and through that you get this benefit. If you do not rely correctly upon a spiritual teacher, obviously you're not going to receive this benefit. So in explaining this point, Pabongka Rinpoche reflects upon the experience of students of Atisha. He said both Dromtonpa, who was not only a student of Atisha, he was also one of the attendants of Atisha. He says both Dromtonpa and Ame Chanchup are texts as Rinpoche, but the Tibetan text Chanchup Rinchen. So both of those practitioners, Dromtonpa and Ame Chanchup Rinchen, diligently served Atisha. One as an attendant, the other as a cook. In terms of concentrations and realizations, or you can say in terms of the practice, the actual experience that they developed through the practice and the realizations that they got, they had more insights and experiences than Mahayogi. So here, Pabongka Rinpoche refers to this great yogi. And this word, a great yogi, implies that that person is solely invested in practice. What they practice is just meditation. So comparing the level of development, of the level of progress of Dromtonpa and Ame Chanchup Rinchen on one hand, and Mahayogi on the other hand, it says that Dromtonpa and Ame Chanchup Rinchen had greater realizations and greater experiences, greater practice. So Atisha could see this, this difference between them, was attributed due to correctly relying upon a spiritual teacher. As the text says, they had also developed more on the stages of the path, the grounds and path, than he had, because they properly relied upon a spiritual teacher. Atisha could see this by clairvoyance and told Dromtonpa, "You travel the path merely by serving your guru, by attending your guru, a grey-haired monk." So Atisha could see the success of Dromtonpa in his progress along the steps of the path, and he could see that this success is attributed to properly relying upon a spiritual teacher. The next paragraph says, some people think that only famous abbots. So first of all, we need to change this translation. Here, famous abbot refers to an abbot that confers a ceremony of ordination. So, and someone that gives a vow of full ordination, a gelung vow, is regarded as an abbot. So some people have that idea that only someone who gives a vow of full ordination, an abbot, or alternatively, people who teach Dharma from high thrones are gurus. So you might have a certain situation where the Lama is around this and conferring an empowerment. We call that Lama a Bhaja master. So some people have that idea that only someone who ordains give full ordination to others, or someone sitting on a high throne in the position of a Bhaja master is regarded as a guru, which means that they have rather a narrow-minded idea of what a guru means. And this text says that this is not so. This is an incorrect understanding of what a guru is. Pabongka Rinpoche says you must also be properly devoted to the teacher who showed you how to read, and the one who shares the same room with you. So that, in some sense, is referring to a setup of a monastic community. So you have your own room, and you might be sharing the same room with a certain teacher. That teacher will show you unerringly the path that you need to follow, the path that you need to traverse. So your understanding of what a guru is, what a lama is not solely constrained, is not solely limited to those abbots that give ordination or to those that sit on high thrones and confer empowerments, but also those that teach you how to read, those that share the same room with you, that unerringly show you the path, are also regarded as gurus. Our text continues saying, when Atisha was ill, Dromtonpa did not regard his feces, not only his feces, also his urine, as something filthy. Rather than regarding them as filthy, he attended Atisha, his teacher. He carried them outside in his bare hands. As a result, he suddenly developed such clairvoyance. And here the clairvoyance that is explained is clairvoyance of knowing other sentient beings' mind, which means knowing what thoughts occur to them, knowing particularly their mental disposition according to that clairvoyance that knows other sentient beings' mind. So here, Dromtonpa is said to have developed suddenly a clairvoyance that could read the subtlest workings of the mind of ants at a place so distant you could have taken a vulture 18 days to reach it. So think about it. It's such an extensive ground, such an extensive area that a vulture can cover in 18 days. And Dromtonpa suddenly, like Geshe said, that it's like the sputtering of a flame that sometimes, when you think of a battle lamp or a candle, you have a sputtering of the flame all of a sudden. So all of a sudden, Dromtonpa developed clairvoyance that could see other sentient beings' mind, even to see the mind of an ant that was placed at a distance so that it would take a vulture 18 days to cover. Looking at the beginning of this paragraph that we've just covered, it says, when Atisha was ill, Dromtonpa did not regard his feces, his urine, as something filthy. He carried them outside in his bare hands. Now, thinking of what this section indicates to us, sometimes actually in this tradition, when a high lama, someone that is regarded as really high, a really precious lama, goes to the toilet, goes to the loo, sometimes a piece of feces or some of the urine is taken out, and it is mixed together with soil, together with sand, and pills, special pills, are made out of it. And it's said that they have this special power to cure either cold or flu, or also to stop contagious diseases, to stop plagues and the like. It is said that those things that come from high lamas, even as far as the feces or urine mixed with sand, have this special ability. So therefore we regard them as something that is very valuable. It is actually something that is not uncommon in this tradition. Those pills are regarded as something that is very precious. So then when you think about it in terms of our own attitude, we shouldn't then regard even feces and urine coming from the lama that we rely upon as substances that are filthy. We should regard them as something that is so precious, so valuable. And there's a reason behind that. There's a reason that we need to regard them as something that is precious, something that is so valuable. Such attitudes are the attitudes that we develop when we properly rely upon a spiritual teacher. Continuing with this paragraph, it says, even today, he is famed everywhere as the grandfather of the Kadampa teachings. So we're referring here to Dromtonpa, who developed this clairvoyance that allowed him to see other sentient beings' mind. So thinking of the great reverence that we have to Dromtonpa, even today, this day and age, Dromtonpa is famous everywhere as the grandfather, or you could say the forefather of the Kadampa teachings. Now this term that is used here for grandfather indicates that Dromtonpa has a certain position amongst the Kadampa scholars. He is regarded as someone that is an authoritative person. He is regarded as someone that is holder of the teaching, so that he can clearly elucidate, clearly explain what points are correct and what points are incorrect. What are the things that are accepted by the teachings, what are the things that are not accepted in the teachings, and in that sense is regarded as an authoritative person. So even today, Dromtonpa is famed everywhere as the forefather, the grandfather of the Kadampa teachings. And the good works of great Atisha himself came about solely through the power of his proper guru devotion. So we have looked at the great activities, the great deeds of Atisha. We looked at the explanation that explained his activities in India, and there were great many things that Atisha did in India, and there were also great many things that Atisha did in Tibet. There are massive volumes of works that explain the different things that Atisha did in India and Tibet. So these good works of great Atisha himself came about solely through the power of his proper reliance upon his teacher. So not only it was the case for Dromtonpa, it was also the case for Atisha himself. Following that, the text gives us a few examples of great sages, great beings from the past that have also practiced properly the way to rely upon a spiritual teacher and thereby attain certain level of realization. So the next paragraph reads, whether a saint or a holy being, good works are extensive or not depends on his devotion. So a certain great being, certain high practitioner of the past has done certain activities. Determining whether those activities are extensive or whether they're not extensive is done in relation to whether they have properly relied upon their spiritual teacher. A proper reliance upon a spiritual teacher would also ensure that that great being of the past would have had extensive works or extensive activities. So for example, it says, Shunwu, who came from Jayu, relied on Geshe Ngawang and served him well. One day he was taking out the rubbish. He has gone only 3 steps when he developed the continuous Dhamma single-pointed concentration. This particular type of concentration that this section refers to is a concentration that is developed at a certain, when you arrive at a certain level of the path. When you arrive at that level of the path, when you develop a concentration of the continuous Dhamma, you have the ability to receive teachings even from statues. Right? So statues talk to you, they give you teachings. Not only that, also texts talk to you, they give you teachings. You have the ability to meet Buddhas in person when you attain that concentration. So Shulu, who came from Jayu, relied on Geshe Ngawang, and he relied properly upon his teacher, and he served him well. So then when he was taking out the rubbish, he has gone only 3 steps, and he developed this concentration when he was able to receive teachings from statues and the like. The following paragraph reads, when Sakya Pandita once asked his uncle, who was also his teacher, the Venerable Dromtonpa Gyaltsen, to compose the text on Guru Yoga. Dromtonpa first said, you only regard me as an uncle, not as a guru. So Dromtonpa Gyaltsen was the brother of Sakya Pandita's father. Sachi was his uncle. And Dromtonpa Gyaltsen, Sakya Pandita regarded Dromtonpa Gyaltsen only as an uncle. He did not regard him as a spiritual teacher. So regarding him as his uncle, asking him to compose a text on Guru Yoga, Dromtonpa Gyaltsen said, you only regard me as an uncle, not as a guru that you rely upon. And did not write this piece. He did not teach him the way to practice Guru Yoga. But then later on, when Dromtonpa Gyaltsen fell sick, Sakya Pandita nursed him. He relied upon Dromtonpa Gyaltsen so well in that he did it in a way that completely at odds with the Guru Yoga practice, so that the Guru, Dromtonpa Gyaltsen, brought about the Guru Yoga. He taught him how to practice the Guru Yoga. From that time on, Sakya Pandita regarded him as a Buddha, as a real Buddha, not just as an uncle, and became a Pandit scholar in the 5 sciences. Now, there are 5 great sciences, there are 10 minor sciences. Altogether, there is a list of 10 sciences, consisting of, for example, the science of Pramana, the science of the art.
Yaki.
Yeah.
Can we read out because it's too muffled now? Yeah.
All right. Okay.
All right.
Okay, so I can try to repeat the end of Geshe-la's teaching. The last section that we've covered was, from that time on, Sakya Pandita regarded Dromtonpa Gyaltsen as a real Buddha, not just as an uncle, and became a Pandita scholar in the 5 sciences. So there are 5 great sciences, there are 5 minor sciences. Altogether, the 10 sciences cover areas such as the Pramana literature, the science of medicine, the science of the arts, the science of theater, and so forth. So he became a great Pandita scholar because he relied upon his teacher that taught him all of these topics. Then the next paragraph says, Tenpa Rabgye, who later occupied the Gaden throne, which means they became the holder or the head of the Gelug tradition, would worry so much whenever his tutor became ill that he almost died himself. Tenpa realized the view, and here Geshe said that it refers to the profound view of emptiness, the view of the profound emptiness, because he nursed his tutor so well, so that he attended his teacher so well, he relied upon his teacher so well, and due to that, he developed a realization of the profound emptiness. That was the last section covered. Now, can you hear me well? Then the next paragraph reads, Purcho Ngawang Jampa one day carried an enormous sack of dried dung. In Tibet, it is common to use cow dung as cooking fuel or as burning fuel. So he carried an enormous sack of dried dung to Drupkang, to the place where a certain meditation retreat was done by Geleb Gyaltso's house. So Purcho had undergone much hardship. It was so difficult to carry this enormous sack of dried dung up there. Not only that, he also attended his spiritual teacher, and Drupkang Geleb Gyaltso gave him an ancient skull cup filled with a consecrated inner offering. So you guys might have seen that before. The using of a skull cup that contains the inner offering. So he gave Purcho Ngawang Jampa the inner offering. Purcho Jampa drank the offering, and his mind stream was blessed. So then he developed an intense renunciation and weariness of samsara. So such realization, the realization of renunciation, the utmost determination to live cyclic existence, the development of weariness of samsara can only occur if one properly relies upon a spiritual teacher, and without a proper reliance upon a spiritual teacher, such qualities cannot be developed. So whatever we might seek to develop, whatever realization we might seek to develop, it might be either clairvoyance or a realization of the profound emptiness, or to give rise to a path in our own mind stream, they can only occur if we properly rely upon a spiritual teacher. Not only this is what Pabongka Rinpoche points out here, also in thinking of the monastic lifestyle in the great monasteries, such as, for example, at Gaden Monastery, it is said that if you want to have a good life, a happy life, a long life, you will have all of that if you properly rely upon a spiritual teacher. This is a key factor for having a long and happy life. The previous Song Rinpoche had an attendant who was called Lobsang Werser, and it was a very good attendant. He attended well to the needs of Song Rinpoche, and he lived a long life, a happy life. When he got old, he got to the age of to his 90s, and he did not experience sickness throughout his life. Towards the end of his life, before passing away, he got sick with a minor sickness, but other than this minor sickness, he did not have any particularly strong sickness or severe sickness occurring before that. So thinking about how relying upon a spiritual teacher contributes to a long and happy life, to a good life, we can come to the conclusion that this is also something that we need to do. I think I need to properly rely upon a spiritual teacher. And as this text also indicates, we should regard the spiritual teacher as being a Buddha in actuality. Regardless of whether the Guru, the Lama, is Buddha. After all, there might be Buddha, there might not be a Buddha. Regardless of that, we should still consider them as a real Buddha. And there is a purpose in considering them as a real Buddha, particularly if you think of the benefit that you get from that in terms of having a long and happy life, or accomplishing whatever you seek in terms of your realizations, in terms of a progression along the stages and paths. This is something that we need to do. If we do it, we'll get the benefit from that. And if we're not going to do it, there's something that will there's be some fault that we will incur, in the sense that we will be missing on all of those great benefits as explained here in the text. So since we want to get that benefit, since we do not want to miss out on those good qualities, those good benefits, we ought to properly rely upon a spiritual teacher. This is something that is really important. Now, Geshe-la is concerned that the internet connection is still a bit dodgy, and he says that if it's still dodgy, maybe we would leave the text here for today without having Q&A, questions and answers. So how has it been going so far? Can you hear me well? We will leave this text for today. We will actually conclude this section here. And before we conclude this session, we will make some aspirational prayers. So think that, may I be cared for by spiritual teachers. May they care for me. May I be able to meet Buddhas, receive instructions, so that it depends upon that. May I be able to attain the state of enlightenment myself. So thinking of this aspiration, we will now also do the common aspirations, the common dedication prayers.